A young boy thrown in jail as a 16-year-old high school sophomore. Now, more than 3 years later, this young man is free. Criminal charges completely dropped. And good evening again at 5:30. I'm Diana Williams.
And I'm Sade Bitterenwa. It is an outrageous case of justice derailed. How could it take 3 years for prosecutors in the Bronx DA's office to figure out they didn't have a case while a teenager sat in jail on Rikers?
Investigative reporter Sarah Wallace joining us now with her exclusive story. Sarah?
Well, Diana and Sade, the Bronx DA's office is refusing to say anything about this case, using the excuse that Khalif Browder has now filed a civil rights lawsuit. He was a teenage kid walking home from a party, literally snatched off the street and charged with robbery. It was a weak case from the very beginning.
I spent 3 New Years in there, 4 of my birthdays. I spent a lot of holidays in there.
20-year-old Khalif Browder may be physically free, but mentally he is still trapped behind bars on Rikers, where every day was a battle to survive.
It's very hard when you're dealing with these dudes that's wild, tall, and they're big, you know what I'm saying? And they got weapons and shanks, and then they're in gangs. And if you don't give your phone call up or you don't give him what he wants, you know they're gonna jump you because he got about other 15 other gang members. It's very scary.
In May of 2010, he was a 16-year-old 10th grader walking home on Arthur Avenue in the Bronx after a party.
The guy comes out of nowhere and says, I robbed him. And the next thing you know, they put in the cuffs, man. I don't even know this dude. And then I do 3 years, over 3 years, for something I didn't even do.
Browder's family couldn't make the $10,000 bail on the robbery charges, and he had a legal aid attorney. Browder is now represented by a civil rights law firm. What was bad about this case?
Pretty much everything. One witness identification from a stranger, no evidence, no property recovered.
Months turned into years. He tried to commit suicide several times.
It was just all balling in my head to the point where I had to just grab my head, like I can't take it.
He missed his sister's wedding, the birth of his nephew, and so many family events. In January, Browder says he was offered a plea deal after 33 months in jail. He refused.
And the judge, she was trying to give me time serving. I wasn't taking it, and she told me if I lose trial, I could get 15 years. Just take the time serving. You go home today if you say you did it. I didn't do it. I'm not saying I did that.
He went back to jail. In June, he was suddenly freed with no explanation.
No apology, no nothing. They just said, oh, case dismissed. Don't worry about nothing. Like, what do you mean don't worry about nothing? I just took over 3 years of my life.
He's now trying to make up for those 3 high school years he lost, taking courses to get his GED.
I didn't get to go to prom, graduation, nothing. Those are the main years. I'm never gonna get those years back. Never. Never.
That's sad. Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. We have today Mary Buza, who's actually witnesses cases like this at Rikers Island. The president just today wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, was it?
Washington Post, yes.
Where he talks about Khalif Browder and what he suffered under this and how he committed suicide because of the torture of solitary confinement. Yeah. Now, you've written a book about this. Tell us your experience with at least these cases with the youth in solitary confinement.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's really terrible because in my experience, Khalif Browder is not, this is not isolated.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I worked on Rikers for about 5.5 years in the mental health department, and I started off as an idealistic intern who was going to make a difference, and wound up being very disillusioned and wound up as an assistant chief of mental health in the solitary confinement unit, which on Rikers at that time was a 500-cell, 5-story tower.
500?
Yeah, 500 cells, called the Bing. So
500 cells for solitary confinement?
yes,
500 cells for...
And every single one of them were full.
What?
And yes.
Oh, I didn't realize it was that bad.
Oh, yes, yes.
Oh, wow.
Full. And it was there were many reasons why I left Rikers Island, but it was probably the final straw for me was working in the Bing because I came face to face every single day with the people who were inside these cells.
Yeah.
And the discoveries that I made were so far removed from what we're told that these cells are for the baddest of the bad and the worst of the worst. I never found Hannibal Lecter. I found primarily broken human beings, very few of whom had committed a violent jailhouse infraction. Most were in there for minor infractions.
Such as?
Disobeying an order, or not understanding an order but being told that they disobeyed an order. Some of them would be as minor as too many stamps. Things, little slight infractions could put you into solitary confinement. And I was very dismayed to see just how grueling this punishment is. On my very first day at the Bing, I was told by my boss that if people did not have mental health issues when they entered solitary, they do now, that we dispensed mountains of antipsychotics, antidepressants, sleeping pills to try to help people to endure this really barbaric punishment. And when those meds could really not hold a human psyche together anymore, people would start banging their heads, attempting suicide, cutting themselves. And I was called to a cell door on a daily basis with a team, a psychiatrist, therapist, to assess the situation, to see whether, basically, whether someone was going to die or not. So people, it is very extreme punishment, very extreme. And
it's torture.
I ultimately came to believe that it was. In the beginning, I told myself, well, this is standard punishment. I live in a nation that prohibits torture, so it can't possibly be torture. So I had a constant battle going on in my head, but ultimately I came to believe that this is torture.
Before your naivete?
It didn't take long at all. You only have to go to a few cell doors to get the picture of the desperation that this induces in a human being, and to know that, you know, we say the United States prohibits cruel and unusual punishment, and that's what I would tell myself, and ultimately I came to the realization that it didn't matter. We are violating that. This is cruel and unusual. There's no question about it.
Now, how did you feel you were helping?
Well, I tried to do the best I could. I was always a compassionate person, a person of principle. I would try to speak very humanely to the person inside, but there was only so much that I could do. We were under fierce pressure to not let people out, but to also make sure that nobody died. So when it took a while for me to realize just what I was being asked to do, and essentially it became the job of monitoring human suffering. And I came to the conclusion that this is something that I could not do any longer. So for me, the Bing was the breaking point.
And you've written a book.
I wrote a book, Lockdown on Rikers.
Okay.
Yes, that came out this past September.
Well, Victor, as usual, you bring the best to us. This is associate of yours. Did you go through any of this madness when you experienced solitary confinement?
Definitely. And being on Rikers Island, back then, early 70s, I mean, you wound up in the Bing, like she said, for very small, minor infractions, as they called it at the time. I mean, you can wind up in the Bing. If your toilet overflowed, they would blame you for stopping up your toilet, and you wind up in the Bing. Hollering out your cell at night while the officers are making the counts and everything, you know what I'm saying? They call that interfering with the count. If you holler, you know, you're in jail and everybody's in their cell, you know, everybody's hollering and screaming and stuff like that. Then if the officer happened to walk by and hear you holler at the time, oh, you know, you're going to the Bing because you was making noise while I was making the count, so that's called interfering with the count. So nobody interferes with the count and on Rikers Island because you can wind up anywhere. For surely I did experience some Bing time, and at the time I was in the House of Detention for Men, which is one of the older jails. They called it HDM. Oh, that was, oh my God. If you weren't crazy when you got there, believe me, it wouldn't take long after you got there for you to become somewhat crazy. Wow. Just to deal with your environment. And at that time, There was no separate the mentally ill from people who are not diagnosed. You were in there with everybody. You don't know who's next door to you. You don't know who's behind you. And you don't know what's going on around you. So there was a possibility you could be with anybody. And just the mere fact of being lumped in with such a wide, diverse group of people, you know what I'm saying? People acted out, you know, arguments and stuff like that there. But the thing about it is that anything, I mean, anything that an officer, like she pointed out, says that you did could wind you up in the Bing.
You know what's so amazing about this? Well, I don't know how many shows you've done on this, but I'm just realizing how huge this is. You said 500 cells.
Yes.
And that's
always
a whole facility. That's what the whole facility is, specifically punitively.
How many, what percentage roughly of those people in the Bing were teenagers? Because, you know, we have children in Rikers, and I'm not talking 13.
This kid was 16.
We have kids younger than that that have wound up in Rikers for major violent crimes, and they're housed separately. But there are what percentage roughly at the time that you were there? 15, 16, 17-year-olds in solitary.
Well, at that time, the adolescents were held in what was called the adolescent jail, the ARDC, Adolescent Reception Detention Center. They had their own solitary unit within that jail. They were not, of the 10 Rikers facilities, the men would be bussed over to the Bing, but the adolescents served their punitive sentences within that facility. And I don't know, because I never worked in that facility.
But there was solitary.
Yes, as there was in the women's facility, yes. The women did not go to the Bing. They served it in their jail as well. Yes.
We have a 17-year-old here, my buddy here, Julian, and we just saw a 16-year-old go through falsely accused of, I mean, he's just a year older than you, younger than you are.
You know, I'm really disgusted to hear these stories, you know? And the thing was, I remember when I was younger, 13 to 5, I was in Catholic school my whole life, and I was very privileged in that sense, to go to a wonderful school and not to be surrounded by this element of poverty. But by the time I was 14 till today, I went to Kennedy, one of the toughest public schools in New York City. And I remember going to the lunchroom and seeing this kid come to the lunchroom every day so early, and I was like, why are you here, man? And he said, because I don't get breakfast at home, and I don't get lunch at home. And you just see the level of poverty and why they say, oh, these kids sell drugs and they do this and do that. They do a lot of this stuff to just basically survive. We have schools, they give us worksheets that are like at a 3rd grade level. They say, why aren't these kids passing SATs? And they just don't understand the level poverty plays in which these kids go to, you know?
Yes.
And it's just a disgusting process.
Yeah.
And I was wondering for you, right, when you see these people in Rikers, how many of them were innocent when you see these cases of these kids?
Or can you tell?
I don't know. I don't know. But I certainly met many people like Khalif Browder who said they were innocent and they were waiting for their day in court. And I would encourage them. I would say, don't take a cop-out. The pressure is tremendous to take a cop-out, which means take a felony, which means be branded for the rest of your life, relegated to a fringe-type existence. So I understood.
So you mean to tell me the majority of people who staying there won't take a plea?
They are being, the DA wants them to take a plea because there's such a clog. They can't possibly try all the cases.
So they leave you in there until you cop a plea.
Yeah.
They try to force
And if you can afford bail, you go
Right.
home and say no. If you can't afford bail, this is what's so unfair. It's a massive arm twist. Take the cop out. We'll get you out of here, up to prison. You're off Rikers Island. It's over. But that's what Khalif Browder refused to do.
Right.
And he faced them with surviving Rikers Island, which ultimately destroyed him.
See, and the district attorney in the Bronx had no case. And they knew they had no case. But they strung this boy along for 3 years and destroyed him in the process. This is one of the most heinous things that is going on in this country, where the poor are daily being victimized by the criminal justice system. If you cannot afford a serious attorney, you're at the mercy of these people.
That's right.
Now, I have seen cases where people are wrongly accused. I've worked on armed robbery cases over the years. My partner and I, we had a case, the guy identified fellas that stuck him up at gunpoint in Harlem. And in going to the house to retrieve evidence and whatnot, I'm like, this doesn't feel right. My partner said the same thing. And we're talking with the DA in the prep for the grand jury, and he says, what do you think? I said, I don't think these boys did it. He says, all right, we're going to postpone the grand jury. He says, just prove that they didn't so we can get them out of it. This was the DA, the ADA. He said, fine. And Danny and I went about proving the fact that these boys did not rob this man. It turned out that he was robbed. He was a merchant in Harlem, a foreigner. And because he was robbed by 2 black guys, he just summarily picked out 2 black guys on the street the following day. And told the officers, those 2 guys held me up yesterday. Now, the boys saw the officers speaking with the man, and they were like, you know, they weren't paying any attention. They were talking to some guys. And they were calmly walking down the street. And when the officers called them, they came back to the officers. And they said, well, the guys said, well, you know, we didn't do anything to him. You know, if we had done anything to you, we could have ran. We'd have been long gone.
Right.
But we got this guy to admit that he never saw the face of either of the 2 guys. I said, do you realize we should arrest you right now for falsely reporting? And he said, you have impugned these individuals. And if it wasn't the fact that we did not believe that the story was credible, they were facing robbery 1, armed robbery. They could have been doing 7.5 to 15 years for a crime they didn't commit. And I've seen this more than once, and I worked on cases where I've had to work on proving that the person that is being accused of the crime didn't commit the crime. You see, and part of the problem is we have attorneys that don't care, we have judges that don't care, we have DAs that don't really care, and they know that there isn't a good case, that the evidence is questionable, the way the evidence was obtained is questionable, the statements from witnesses, the lineup process is critical. How they were identified. Detectives sometimes say, well, on a scale of 1 to 10, is he a 5? Is he a... That's not the way you do a lineup. Not the way I do a lineup. You have to tell me without a question in your mind, that is the person that robbed you. Not that looks like the guy, it could be the guy. If you're not telling me that's the guy, he's going home. But every case is not done that way.
You're a fair guy.
And this is how people get caught up.
That's right.
But the DA wants to prove their point. They don't care. They don't care if you're innocent or guilty. They don't want to lose the case.
Tell me, I know just yesterday President Obama made a few comments in the Washington Post. How did this impress you? I know you have a copy of it right here.
I do.
All right.
I do. I applaud President Obama.
Thank you.
He took a bold step. He announced reforms to solitary confinement in the federal prison system. And this is unprecedented. And when you think that a few years ago, solitary confinement was invisible in this country. And he has announced these reforms. They will impact the federal. It's not going to affect everyone at all.
Rikers Island. It won't affect
No, because Rikers is not a federal prison.
Right.
It's going to, pregnant women cannot be held in solitary confinement, the mentally ill, juveniles. He has put different categories of people who cannot be in. He also wants the prisons to rethink how long people can be, more hours out of the cell. I wish he'd been more specific, because they could say we'll increase time out by 5 minutes. But the larger message here is that he has sounded the alarm that we're hoping the states are now going to follow. And in New York State, there's a lot happening with solitary confinement. But just that it brings the whole thing into the spotlight, his, very bold, I thought, what he did. Very hopeful for people.
You know, I find it very interesting. You know, we have a lot of young folk who believe that the system is just disgusting and that they shouldn't get involved at all. But before we were getting started, I was talking to Brother Graham here, and I asked him about his fearlessness, even though he was a cop. And he told me that, you know, he doesn't feel as if he's pledged to anybody. He believes what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong, and he stands by that. And we need more young people to understand his philosophy and take that as themselves and to move forward in that same system. Or for your example,
you've met an exception to the rule. And Graham,
well, we need to turn that into what we would call normal.
Exactly.
Right.
As opposed to the exception.
Exactly.
You know, and we need young people to
But
enter
how many
law
cops
enforcement
out there
and law.
that you know are as fair as you are, Graham?
I've worked with a number of guys.
What
And
percentage?
he doesn't
10?
take statistics, but
10%?
he can't tell you the percentage. But he wants a number.
I've worked with teams of people where I never had to question their integrity and what they were doing. And I'm not talking just black cops and black detectives, white, black, Latino, and Asian that I've worked with. And it was never a question of integrity because we approach the job in the same way, although the majority of officers are not. And I had an incident where a cop got punched out. It was a transit cop. He was telling the guy to leave the station real quick. And he's poking the guy with the nightstick. And the guy said, "Hey, you told me to leave. I'm leaving. Don't poke me. I'm not a cow. I'm in charge here." And he's poking the guy again. And the guy spun around, dropped him. I laughed. This was out in Jamaica years ago, back in the 70s. I laughed. And the guy ran through the turnstile and went up the stairs. And the cop says, "What's so funny? You know, you're not supposed to do it. You don't tell me what I'm supposed to do. You told the guy to leave, he was leaving. You had no business poking him with the stick. All right? If you think that I'm going to endorse your negative behavior, you're wrong. So if you're as tough as you think you are, you should have taken the hit and come back with a punch. But you couldn't do that. You got knocked on your behind. You see? So it's not about endorsing and backing up what is wrong at all. Can't do that. And we've consistently been hiring people that have the wrong attitude, the wrong motive for becoming a police officer, and it's not a job. That's something you need to be called to do.
Like being a
And if you haven't been called to do it, it's not going to work. And I'm not talking about a kid, "Oh, I was 5 years old, I want to be a policeman." It's not about the gun and the badge. And if you're scared, you have no business being in the business.
Exactly.
If you've never had a fight in your life prior to getting into the police department, you don't have any business in the police department. Because if you can't handle yourself, then the first thing you're going to do is try and protect yourself with a gun. And that's the last thing you do. So, you know, I've been in situations where I could have shot a number of people. I'm talking armed robberies, bank robberies, all sorts of stuff. I've had guns aimed on me in a bank robbery. We were, let's go for it. But you know, you've got to be called, and for what you did. See, you went in.
She said she was called.
Yeah, that's what I was getting to. She was called because you didn't just go there and say, "Oh, I can't handle this, I'm leaving." You're exposing what is wrong, and you refuse to be the oil in a machine that's grinding people up and killing people, destroying people mentally, like the 16-year-old boy that wound up committing suicide.
What about the women in prison? Do they go through? I imagine they go through a worse traumatic experience than the men.
I didn't find that to be the case.
No?
No, and that was just it's all subjective.
Okay.
When I worked with the women, their charges were less serious than what the men were charged with for the most part. So again, Rikers is a jail complex for people who've been charged with a crime but not convicted.
Right.
So you have women there charged more with prostitution, shoplifting, drug possession versus sales. So they were looking at if they copped out or were found guilty at trial, to shorter sentences than the men.
Okay.
I found there to be much more desperate sense of desperation in the men's jails, and with the women there were many more programs because
programs.
Yeah, because they were going to be getting out sooner. So there was a big emphasis on life after jail. Whereas with the men, it was such a contrast. Oh, with the women, we never gave them sleeping pills because we didn't want to replace one drug with another in the mental health department. With the men, like candy, given out, as though it was a lost cause. And there was a great sense of sadness I found in the.
Are you familiar with the
jails.
Sandra Bland case?
Yes.
All right. What do you think happened there?
no idea more than anybody else. It's very, very suspicious, but I don't know what could have.
Do you think a person like that could commit suicide in a prison?
No. I mean, is it possible?
Yeah.
You sure?
No,
I don't think whether she did or not, I don't know.
Because I'm going to show you Sandra Bland as very few people have seen her. Because we did a show about a month ago where we had somebody call in. You remember that, Graham?
Yeah.
And they said that the circumstances was that she didn't have the money, or people
to bail her
couldn't
out.
find enough money to come get her out. So she was so depressed that possibly she did commit suicide.
I don't think so.
Although her family
Well, you saw that piece that I ran last
I've seen
time,
that piece,
right?
and
She was too strong of a person.
Yeah, my take on that is that they didn't tell the whole story, and there's still some parts that wasn't told. Based upon the information that I got and what I know about the case, and she was somewhat of a community activist also. Very, very involved in the community and stuff like that there. And she was involved in a lot of things that would benefit the community. And what happened to her shouldn't have happened. I don't think the whole story is told. I don't think she committed suicide. I think it was another concocted story that was told to a way that society would accept it as it was told. But I seriously have doubts that she actually committed suicide, or that she had any reason to commit suicide. I mean, everything that was told about her life, what she was involved in and stuff like that there, and then to be arrested for something, something minor, a traffic stop. I mean, how would that lead a person to even contemplate suicide? I mean, yeah, she didn't have the money to get out and stuff like that there, but for her to even begin to think about suicide, I mean, what could have been going on that she would think that she would have to commit suicide for? I can't wrap my head around to believe that she committed suicide. Something is wrong, and the whole story hasn't been told, and I think there's further investigation is needed, and I just don't think that she committed suicide. I just don't think so.
I find it to be somewhat of a constant. We see that these young people, or these older people, get stopped by these cops, and then we're saying, well, they shouldn't have resisted. Well, our tax money goes to the police department, so we deserve as much respect as anybody else. I think the second thing that you were alluding to was talking about life after prison. When you have education, as you were saying before, it increases the likelihood that you'll be a productive member towards society. So why wouldn't they want to put that inside those prisons, in your opinion? Why do you feel like they don't put those grants or things like that?
Well, simply because prisons mean money. It's an industrial complex. Exactly what they said. The prison industrial complex. It generates income. And from people suffering, people gain. People, private prisons, stock market. People stand to gain financially from people being locked up. $50,000 to $55,000 a year to keep an adult person in jail for 1 year. $55,000. Let's imagine I was worth $55,000 a year. 5 years.
It's
they made a lot of money.
Yeah, Rikers Island is $130,000.
You have
Did you hear what
you have three shifts of correction officers.
$130,000.
Okay? You got three shifts of correction officers around the clock.
Say that again, please.
Yeah, the New York
counting
Times a
everything
few
else.
months ago did an article on the cost of incarcerating someone at Rikers Island. It came up with $130,000 a year.
And that's before conviction.
That's right.
Right.
Before conviction, pre-trial detention status.
I brought up Sandra Bland because of the fact I felt bad about this last show that we did, because I said a few things. I reviewed the tape, and I sort of didn't give her justice. So I want to run this tape on Sandra Bland. Does this give you an idea what kind of human being? This is from Sandy Speaks, her social page. All right, run the Sandra Bland thing, please.
I went through.
Good morning, my beautiful kings and queens. It is Friday, April 10th, 2015. It's kind of chilly out here this morning, so hopefully you bundled up. Kings and queens, someone proposed me with the question the other day, and I'm a little stuck on it. I was asked, was I trying to racially unite or racially incite? Well, honestly, I feel that my goal is to racially unite. Now, in the process of doing that, some people will be incited, i.e. upset, because based on the history of America, it is not good when it comes to black and white people. But I want us to try and get past that. And that is ultimately impossible. It's impossible to happen until certain people realize they were born into a certain type of privilege. And it does not matter if you never break a law, or if you never get into any trouble. Part of the reason for that being is the police don't even suspect you of doing anything wrong. And that's just how it is. For those of you who did not like the video that I posted earlier this week or yesterday and decided to get on my page calling me a racist, a dumb bee, I just think quite disrespectful. You know, guys, you don't have to watch my videos. You really don't. Because at the moment, they're not for everybody. I would want them to be, but unfortunately they can't be, especially when we're talking about a subject as touchy as race relations, all of this mess that's going on in America. So for those of you who think that I'm a racist, please remove yourself from my page and just don't watch Sandy Speaks. Sandy Speaks does not promote racism. Sandy Speaks does not promote going out there and killing all white people. I don't know if those of you who feel that I'm a racist, didn't see a couple weeks ago me walking around Fox Valley Mall holding a sign that I spent my money on, took time out to make, that said, all white people are not against us. Because I don't truly feel that way. But for those of you who cannot accept and acknowledge the white privilege that you were born into, no fault of your own, but just accept it and know that, yes, black people are going to be mad when we see things like our brothers being gunned down, murdered. And for those of you who can say, oh, well, why was he running? Why was he breaking the law? Let's just flip the script. And if that was your uncle and he ran, do you think he would have got shot 8 times in the back? Probably not. They might have got him in the leg. I am not a racist. I'm going to share a little bit of something with y'all. For so long, I was so misguided and confused, I thought that the only way to have pretty kids would be to marry a white person. Yes, ooh. My mind was so messed up. But I see clearer now. There are kings and queens in all of us. But at the moment, the people who truly need to be realizing their kingdom and queendom are my black brothers and sisters. I'm sorry. So for those of you who are uncomfortable, who don't want to hear a positive message aimed towards the brown, you don't have to watch it. I am not against white people. To be successful in this world, you have to know how to work with white people. But what Sandy Speaks wants to do is let my kings and queens know you can do it. We can be successful. It is up to us. I love you all dearly. I hope you have a great day. I hope you have a successful and prosperous day. Do what is necessary to establish your kingdom and queendom and just be great. Go out there and be the greatest thing that you can, and I guarantee you it will turn your life around. Sandy Speaks.
Beautiful.
Wow.
You know, the first time I saw that, I cried.
Yeah.
I broke out in tears because I said, now this poor child was stopped by this in a Texas town by a cop and thrown on the ground.
It's horrible. There was video of that, right?
Yeah. I didn't bring that, but you know the story.
Yes.
And to think that she would commit suicide?
You know, as I was watching it, I was thinking to myself, my job in the jails was to assess people. And if I thought that someone was suicidal, psychotic, in any way mentally ill, as all of the team, I would sign the papers, take them out of general population onto a mental observation unit. So I was imagining myself talking to this woman. Would I have pulled her out of general population? No. No.
If she were placed in mental observation, what are the procedures when a person is in a cell and they're under mental observation? What is the duty of the correction officers or the individuals in that facility if they know the person has a mental condition?
Well, if we think someone was suicidal, they would have been put on a dorm. If I thought they were suicidal, because we had dorms and cells. So anyone at high risk for suicide was always put in an open area to be observed.
So that means there is at least one officer there watching those individuals in that dorm,
And
in
we
the
would
dorm
have
situation.
enhanced suicide prevention cots that had to be placed right by the bubble, where we had red tape on the floor, let's say 5 cots if we thought someone was at extremely high risk. That's where they had to stay in constant observation from officers in the bubble.
Observation.
You know,
That's the
On
key
the
word.
observation
Observation.
unit.
I got you.
You
Now,
know,
go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Grant.
Right, well, you're going to get to
my
where was the observation
I
here.
wanted to ask, usually this is an educational program, right? So if someone goes to prison, they need to know some rights that they do have. So what rights do you have as a prisoner, if any? Yeah, right?
Let me see.
Right?
Right. Yeah, so
You have the right to remain silent. You have your Miranda rights.
yeah.
And this is not like when you go to the hospital, the patient has rights.
Yeah.
Your basic rights, you do have constitutional safeguards. You're not to be brutalized.
Which happened?
Which happens. You're not to be brutalized by the inmates or by the officers. You know, the institution is responsible for your overall health and well-being. Sometimes people go in, they're ill, and they don't even get the medical treatment they need, and they've died. All right, asthmatics, other people have died because the Department of Correction failed to provide them with the medical care that they needed. So yes, you do have some rights, but you don't have the rights. And remember, the Constitution says once you're incarcerated, you become a slave.
That's right.
That's the Constitution. You are no longer a full-fledged citizen of the country. You have become a slave, and the state can do with you and treat you as a slave. But keep in mind, under the old laws of slavery, you could not brutalize a slave. You could not brutalize chattel in the old system in this country. There were 2 white men who were sentenced to death for brutalizing a slave in North Carolina in the 1850s. So animals get better treatment than human beings get in this country right now. Animals have more rights than you have.
Look at the uproar that happened after Cecil the Lion was killed. No.
Okay, Cecil the Lion.
Yeah, right? So now you know what rights that you have. Being a convicted felon, prisoner, et cetera, you have the rights that the prison gives you. You have a rule book. That's your rights. When you're in prison, they give you a rule book. Those are your rights. Those rights are not within the normal constitutional rights that a free person would receive normally. So you have considerably small amount of rights that the institution allows you to have. And if any of those rights are violated, as they consider being violated, yeah, you have a right to file a grievance. And there are grievances that you can file with regards to whatever treatment that you might have received.
Where does that go? Where does that go?
I'm getting ready to tell you. I'm going to tell you right now. So the rights that you get are confined within that institution, and it goes nowhere. It goes nowhere unless that what violation happened to you is so egregious that it requires an inspector general to be called in or file with an inspector general's report, because you have an inspector general office that oversees all state correctional facilities. And if something happens within that facility that is to the great amount that your life, you was almost beaten within an inch of your life. Well, of course, you're going to file agreements. But other than that, those are the only rights that you have. And you have a right to file agreements. Where that grievance goes, it goes within the institution. It's governed by the institution and the administration of the institution. And more likely than not, you might as well just keep your mouth shut and keep it moving.
Browner complained and they beat him.
Wow. I was going to say, you also run the risk of retribution for filing a grievance. It's not just filing.
I'm going to show one more part of this solitary confinement. And I want you to, when we come back, I want you to explain to us the most grievous situation you've seen. Perhaps you have it in your book. All right?
I have,
So, right
yes.
after this. So we'll give you another exposure to what solitary confinement is about. All right? Just play this last piece and we'll come right back to you.
Do you all go on visits to the prisons?
When it's torture, I think about as torturous as you can get. I did altogether 26 years in prison. The first 5 years was spent going back and forth in the SHU. My longest term in there without break was, I think, 24 months. It was horrible. To set a man inside a closed structure for years on end, man, that's an atrocity, man. You're trying to destroy a human being.
I was a person that was incarcerated for 18 years, and out of the 18 years, I would say I spent about 5 years in solitary confinement, 2 years straight at one time and off and on. And the treatment that I received there and what I witnessed of other people was just inhumane.
I served 9 years in the New York State prison system and was sent to solitary confinement. It's a horror movie.
My son is in Pelican Bay State Prison. He's in the security housing unit. His total time, consistent straight through in solitary confinement has been 14 years now.
You start hearing your own heartbeat. I would lay in my bed and just squeeze like my whole body just to feel something.
I did a total of 3 years altogether in solitary, with the longest stint being about 10 months straight. You have people dying in solitary. You have people committing suicide. You have people dying from heat in solitary. These are real issues that are happening right now, right here in our soil. It's not just happening, in another country. This is happening right here, right now. People being tortured. People are allowing it to happen, not because they agree, but because they simply just don't know about it.
Solitary confinement is a product of, as well as a contributor to, the mass incarceration of people that is happening around our country. Incarceration in this country is unprecedented for this nation and for any nation. We have 1/4 of the world's incarcerated people, even though we only have 5% of the world's population. This is unprecedented. This is a racialized system of social control that has followed a long line in this country, from slavery to Jim Crow segregation to ghettoization to now incarceration. And solitary confinement is a manifestation of that.
What happened to me in prison should not have happened, but it did. And because of that, I feel like the 18 years that you took from me and they messed me up and left me with the mental illness, I will spend the rest of my days being an advocate for the people that cannot speak. But what has happened to me, I will not allow to happen to anybody. And this is how I spend my days, trying to make a difference.
It's going to take a mass movement of the people. There's just so many things that every single person can do in making a difference.
So we still using the same principles that as a society we have said we've stepped above, that morally we're beyond doing, torturing people, beating people, whipping people. This is not for one particular religious organization. This is not for one person's view of a higher power. This is for all humanity to say, from a human rights level, we cannot let humans be furtherly damaged by a system that we control. And we have the power to change that.
colleagues.
I was always so impressed. A lot of these people have been on the show here. Now, give me your extreme case.
I wish I could say that I had one extreme case.
That's so many?
Yes, yes. As I said, virtually everyone was on some kind of medication, and the warden welcomed us into his office, the deputy warden of the Bing. Anything, door always open, whatever he could do for mental health, happy to do, because he would say, just the medication makes this place somewhat manageable, to just medicate people against this. But again, it doesn't, typically depending on the length of time that someone is in that cell, they break down and there's no medication anymore that's going to hold them together. So again, I was called to cell doors, and it was virtually a daily event. And what I would see was a lot of blood, a lot of head banging, a lot of, it's gory, but the gleam of someone's skull from banging their head, tremendous amount of blood, people babbling incoherently, people smeared in feces, people with makeshift nooses around their necks, pink welts around their necks, extreme levels of breakdown of human beings is what I witnessed on a regular basis.
Have you, when an inmate comes in,
Yes.
do you interview them at that point prior to their being totally disheveled after going to the Bing? I mean, if you say I was an inmate coming in, and I'm coming through orientation, and you do an assessment of me.
There is no assessment. You would have been assessed when you came into the system. If you got an infraction ticket and you went to the Bing, you would not go through mental health first. You might say then to an officer, or I'm feeling depressed, or mental health staff are constantly on that floor, I'm feeling depressed. That, or medical, you would tell them, a referral would be generated, then you'd be evaluated.
But if say I walk in, you see me, I'm just a regular guy.
Right.
How you doing? I go in. Now all right, but you haven't interviewed me.
Right.
So you don't get to me until I'm already messed up.
Right.
So there's no way of truly exposing, I shouldn't say exposing, but saying, all right, when Weatherspoon came in here, he was like this. After this period of time in the Bing, he's like this. His mind is gone. He wasn't like that when he walked in here.
No, we did see that. Our motto is if they had no mental health issues before they came in, they do now.
All right, so who's liable for that? Is the city of New York, the Department of Correction, taking the weight for destroying people mentally, because they were not on meds when they went into the Bing. But as a result of the Bing now, they're heavily medicated.
Yes. The Department of Correction, typically, I don't know what the department would say officially, but what the officers would say is 99% of the time they say they're faking.
They're not psychologists. They can't make an assessment.
No, they can't, but they do.
But they say
all the time. All the time.
They fake it.
They'll say they're doing this to get out.
Oh, okay.
So there's always a lot of tension between the correction department and the mental health department.
But you know personally that solitary confinement drives people crazy.
I would say so, yeah, it can. Not with everyone, and it depends on the length of time. The longer it goes, the worse the damage.
Victor,
I know.
How close did you get to insanity?
Oh, man. Well,
Did you get there?
I was almost there. And I say that I was almost there, and I guess my second time around, because for me, like I said, it started on Rikers Island. I've been to the Bing a couple of times. I mean, Rikers Island Bing wasn't nothing. To me, it wasn't nothing.
Really?
I mean, to me, it wasn't nothing.
Okay.
But when I got upstate, it became a whole different horse. A whole different horse altogether.
How much time did you spend in Rikers?
When I was there?
In the Bing?
Well, maybe 30 plus days. Not at one time, but at different increments.
Okay.
So it was broken up.
Yeah, it was broken up. But actually, going to the Bing on Rikers Island, it was like a break from all the rest of the crew. I was glad to be there to get some peace and quiet. Getting upstate, going to solitary confinement, There's a whole different thing altogether. And I think that after my second week there, man, I started started talking. I started that conversation with myself that they always say you begin to have, you know what I'm saying? And started doubting if I actually really existed. Because I mean, when you talk about solitary, it's solitary.
Wow.
And
so it's 23 hours.
23
no
hours a
contact
day,
with
no
other-
contact. The officers walk by, like I say, depending on each facility.
Nobody
is
talks
different.
to you.
Yeah, well, talk to you. You can't hear nobody talking to you. Each facility's solitary wing is constructed differently. Some they sell, some is just steel doors with a slot and stuff like that. Different structures, right? But I know that Attica, Sing Sing facilities. Solitary confinement is something that you could go in halfway sane, and for any long period of time, and that's why when I hear people say, they was in solitary confinement for 20 and 30 years.
Yeah. Is that possible?
It happens.
Oh, sure.
Not is it possible, it happens.
Yeah.
People are in solitary confinement.
20 years?
30 and 40 years.
California's son has been in for 14. It's
Albert Woodfox, 43 years. Solitary confinement. 43 years in solitary.
Who was that?
Albert Woodfox. The Angola 3, Louisiana.
Angola prison, the worst in the country.
Yeah.
Most people don't come out of it.
43 years. How you do 43 years in never mind being incarcerated, but in solitary confinement? I don't know if I could have did that. I really don't. I don't think I could have did that.
So
I think I would have went beyond.
Wow.
Wherever that beyond was, I think I would have been there already.
Mm.
But this is what, in solitary confinement in New York State, okay, there is no time frame that you can keep a person. You can keep a person in solitary confinement indefinitely until they die. And that's why we do what we do with the solitary confinement halt bill, which is what we're working on now, a coalition to end solitary confinement in New York State.
Mm-hmm. Humane alternatives to long-term confinement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm. So what's the answer? What President Obama said about the youth? What about the adults? I mean, what's being done about all this? What does your book tell us?
Well, it tells us that it's not good for anyone.
Okay.
And I think it's a big step. I think the earth moved with Obama's announcement earlier this week. But certainly adults matter as well. And that's the heavy population that's in solitary. There aren't that many juveniles in the federal system in solitary. But that's the bigger one that has to be.
I think that it was a good a move that he made, and I applaud him on that. It's not enough. There definitely needs to be a lot more done. The states need to definitely get on board.
What do you think Cuomo should do?
He should sign the solitary confinement bill that's called HALT, which would drastically change the way solitary confinement is in New York.
Is that what Senator Perkins was pushing?
Phil Perkins.
Yes.
He's the sponsor of the HALT bill. He's one of the sponsors.
Well, we had him on the program.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, we had him on. So what's happening with, we should have the senator call in, and we have to get him on a Skype.
Yeah, next time.
Okay.
I mean, the HALT bill would limit solitary in New York State to no more than 15 days.
15 days, which is enough.
In alignment with what the United Nations
right. That's
has said beyond 15.
Beyond 15, you're getting into borderline torture, right?
Right.
And we human beings are not designed to be alone.
Right.
Right.
If you take a newborn baby in a hospital and just leave it there, feed it, and don't touch it, it will die within a week to 2 weeks.
Yes. Yeah.
We must have contact.
Interaction.
That's part of our makeup.
Yes.
It's what keeps us going. No man is an island, right? So this bill needs to be passed in the state legislature, and Governor Cuomo, he needs to sign it, and it should be an issue. it should be an issue in anything he's going to do forward beyond this current status as governor. If he's going to run again, anything, this needs to be an issue if he doesn't sign the bill.
What have you learned today, Julian?
Well, I've learned that I've learned a lot, man.
Stay out of prison.
So
for sure, right, Julian?
If you can.
Yeah, but what I think I learned is the biggest thing, which I tell young people, man, if you want to make a change, you got to be that change. You got to get involved. You can't really care about how the way the current system looks. You got to care about the vision where you want to move towards.
Amen.
That's for real. And I look at Brother Graham, I look at this brother, look at her, and it's just amazing to see the change that's going to come. But it can't come from just a certain group of people or a small group. It needs to be ever continuous. And if we don't do that, man, then we're going to keep on seeing the solitary confinement for 20 years and over. We're going to keep on seeing the young kids that are going to kill themselves after coming out of prison for doing nothing. We're going to continue seeing those same issues. And if people who say, man, it's not even worth fighting for, look where we came from, man. Just look where we came from. And if you can look at that, then you can look towards the future.
Amen.
What's the name of the book?
Lockdown on Rikers.
Lockdown on Rikers.
Yes. Yes.
I have to get that.
Mary, it's been a treat today.
This is amazing.
Thank you for having me.
You know, I mean, it's really, I love the way you presented the whole thing about going in naive and then seeing all these atrocities.
Yes.
How did you sleep at night?
That's such a good question, because I talk about that in the book. Towards the end, when I was in the Bing and I was breaking down.
Of course.
And I was not sleeping. And I started smoking cigarettes, which I didn't really chain smoking.
Wow.
Up all night, worried about everyone. You know, is this person going to make it? Is this person? And just so traumatized by what I was witnessing every day that was so far removed from my understanding of our justice system when I first entered. I entered like a regular American thinking that we had a good system, and then discovered bit by bit what it was really about.
The true horrors of reality.
Yes.
And can I get a quick minute of promo? And Mary, my colleague, her and I have been on a few forums together, but there's an event coming up that she's going to be one of the speakers on. Maybe you'd just like to mention that right quick.
Yes, thanks, Victor. On February 18th, which is a Friday evening at 7 p.m., 7 to 9, this is in Park Slope, St. Thomas Aquinas Church, Holy Family. There's going to be a seminar regarding passage of the Holt Bill. We have some speakers. Scott, who was in this film that you saw, will be speaking. The head of the National Religious Campaign Against Torture will be speaking. I will be speaking. A formerly incarcerated person in solitary.
And with that, we have 5 seconds. The God in me loves the God in you. God bless. Amen. Power to the people.
That's